What's up guys, Shawnthebro here, and in today's episode of the Fighting Game Tutorial Series, we're going to be going over Tag Team Matches Part 3. So this one is going to be more of a live episode, because I need to fix up the errors that were created from the logic we implemented in the previous episode, and those errors are only natural. So in the previous episode, we went over adding these characters, so if we're in duos, we're both going to spawn 2 characters. Just as proof of concept to make sure we're reading the enum value for the team mode type correctly, and because we wanted to start spawning additional characters in proper positions to match what we want in our actual fight. However, you can see it's a little laggy, and the reason it's laggy is because when I close this here, I'm going to get errors. We did fix all of the errors that would cause crashes in the previous episode, but these errors don't cause crashes. They lead to broken logic, which is pretty much just as bad in this case. As a developer, we want to make sure we catch everything we can and support everything we can. So today's going to be all about fixing those up. Now, before we hop into this episode, if you want to get caught up in the series and check out all the episodes before this, all 231 episodes, hitboxes, game modes, the beginnings of online multiplayer, it's all covered in this playlist. Alternatively, if you don't care about that, that's perfectly fine. I do recommend you watch the previous tag team match episodes. This is part 3 of tag team matches. It is going to be building on the logic from part 1 and 2. I'll link that in the top right corner right here. But with that out of the way, we can go ahead and get started. So the first thing that's going to happen here is when you get these errors, we want to solve them. And to do that, we can simply go to the error. Now, I have episodes on debugging, but we're not really going to need a lot of that today. Most of it will be pretty self-explanatory from what I've seen. In your error log, just start at the top, always start at the top, and we're going to look at the error, access non-trying-to-read property, HUD reference, when we're calling set visibility. So I want to click on text here, the set visibility, and it is going to open the file, which I open my AnimBP, and it is going to try and focus the event graph in that area. So we can see this is the node that is causing the issue. So the HUD reference is invalid, but we're trying to call set visibility on it. And the reason HUD reference isn't valid is because in our logic to set HUD reference, we were doing that for player 1 and player 2, which were individual characters. We now have this thing called Team 1 characters array and Team 2 characters array, and that stores all the characters for these tag team matches. However, when new characters get added to them, if they're not assigned to the player 1 and player 2 variables within the game mode, then they're not going to have the HUD reference set, and so it's going to be invalid for those characters. Now, in this case, the logic we're doing here is hiding the HUD reference when we're starting the entrance sequence. We don't have to do that for every character. Every character should be able to see the HUD one way or another. Really, the HUD should be able to pull data from the characters. But each character doesn't need to tell the HUD reference to set their visibility. As far as the errors go, really we want to just check for validity here, because we're not going to need to add a HUD reference for every single character. So, there's a few ways you could do it. The easiest way is just by putting this HUD reference here, right-clicking on it and converting it to a validated get, and then only if it's valid do we want to set the visibility. Then feel free to clean it up as well with some reroute nodes if you'd like. And Unreal is bugging out a little bit at the moment, so keep spawning this pop-up right where my cursor is, which I don't want. So I will fix that in a second. But something like this will be fine, just as long as we check for validity on that HUD reference before calling set visibility. Additionally, we probably still want to play the sound effect even if the HUD isn't visible, so I'm actually going to drag the is not valid on the HUD reference into the custom play sound 2D, because the HUD does not dictate the sounds that are played, so even if there's an issue there, the entrance sound for the mutant can still play. So there we go. That's our first one. You can go down the list if you want, so I could just look at another error, or you could launch every time, go back in here, skip through. Really, as soon as you load in here and your second characters are spawned, you can close and you'll get the errors. And we're just going to go down to the next one. So here we go. It's saying other player is not valid in the get thrown rule. This makes sense. Other player, again, is set between player 1 and player 2. Now, unlike the previous issue, each character should have a reference to the other player. Really, the other player is a variable that we have in the series that represents the other character that we're currently fighting at the moment. Again, however, Other player is for only one character though. We are going to need to support this for all of our characters. We're going to need to know if any of the characters have landed a throw. Now we could try to actually solve this with an is valid, or we could just fix the problem. So I say we just go ahead and fix the problem. So first of all, let's go into our game mode blueprint. Game modes, default game mode BP, and go to the event graph. Now we need to figure out where we set the other player for each character, and that's right here. So see, player 1 and player 2 variables have their other player variables set. The other characters that are in the team 1 characters and team 2 characters array won't have these values set, so it's not going to be valid. We have a few options here of what we could actually do. Because the point of this episode is just fixing the errors so that we can run smoothly as we get into more tag team matches, I'm not going to go into a huge thing right now. I'm going to set all of team 1 characters to have player 2 as the other player, and all of team 2 characters to have player 1 as the other player. So we'll go ahead and make that right now. So we can grab our team 1 characters, and we can do a for each loop. We can drag off the array element, type set other player. In this case, like I said, I'm going to use player 2 and just set player 2 as the other player for every single team 1 character. This is because right now I'm thinking of player 2 as the active character that player 2 is controlling. So if it's a duos match, there's only one character out at a time. Even with assists and things like that, there's only one character that's truly being controlled. That's what player 2 is going to represent right now. So as far as team 1, all the characters on team 1 are concerned, player 2 is the other player, or the player they're looking at. It's going to be a little bit more involved than that as we continue in tag matches, but this will be good enough for now. Additionally, player 1 is within team 1 character, so I actually don't have to use this anymore. I could completely replace it. So the true of the previous branch, where we're checking to see if player 1 and player 2 are valid, can go into the for each loop. The loop body goes into other player being set to player 2, and then completed we go to the next set of logic. However, we also want to do this for team 2 characters. So let's make some space here. Something like that should do. So on completed of the for loop, just do something like this. And we want to grab team 2 characters. We want to do a for each loop on that. We want to drag off the array element and set other player. But we want to add player 1 as the other player, right? All of the characters that player 2 controls are looking at team 1 character's active player, which we're assuming for now is player 1. So we just want to put player 1. In there. Remember, we can actually remove player 2's setting of other player here because player 2 is contained within team 2 characters. So I'm going to remove this node as well. Actually, just this one. And we'll clean this up here. Still want to do the is facing right behavior for now. And let me move things a little bit more. So there we go. Player 1 and player 2 and all the characters on their team. Other player is set for all characters. Drag off of completed and put it into logic that was there before. There we go. Other player is set for all the characters in the game. Like I said, it's going to be a little bit more advanced as we get into tag team matches, but quite frankly, that's the same concept we're going to be using. There is going to be one active player. That got rid of a ton of our errors, and again, the HUD reference isn't really something that should be set on every character. They should be able to send data to the HUD, and the HUD should be able to pull data from each character. Each character does not need a reference to the HUD. That is something that will be changing. So instead of just setting HUD reference on these characters, I am going to go and fix these errors through validity checks. So the next one is in the NMVP, and this is when we finish the entrance animation. and you can see we are trying to set the HUD reference back to visible at this point. However, you probably know what I'm going to do. I'm going to right click on our HUD reference, convert it to a validated get, and plug this in. Only if it's valid do we want to try and set the HUD to visible. Also, only if it's valid do we want to call trigger screen messages. Now we're doing this node in between where we're setting both entrances to finished. This is something within our animation blueprint. I do want to do this behavior regardless of if the HUD reference is valid or not. So I'm going to do a little bit of moving around here. I'm going to disconnect this node, move it over here, and then I'm going to move trigger screen messages over here. I'm going to bring both entrances finished and plug it in here. I just reorganized those nodes, that way we can do both of these things if the HUD reference is valid and then continue. If it's not valid, we can skip these things and go straight from is not valid into both entrances finished, because we should be able to do that. Now there's nothing to be concerned about here because I know the screen messages do tell the characters when to start the match, but remember, when this HUD reference is valid, which it should be valid at least one time at some point, we are going to trigger the messages. If it's invalid for all the characters, that is a bigger issue that needs to be addressed. So we only need one HUD. We only need to trigger the screen messages through one HUD, set it to visible on one HUD. So if it doesn't work on the other characters because there's no HUD, it's fine. So now that we got that fixed up, let's go and launch the game again. And all of our errors are fixed. So now we should be able to play our game and the tag match should function relatively correctly. We shouldn't get that lag we were getting, and there will be some other things that work a little bit better. So for example, if I jump to the right of second player's second character, then they should flip when I jump back over. You'll notice though that they weren't flipped to start, and that's because, again, we weren't accounting for tag team matches. We're basically going to have to go in and instead of using player 1 and player 2 everywhere, we want to use the team 1 characters and team 2 characters array. So you're going to see a lot more things come into life than you did in the previous episode, but there are still going to be some issues that can come up, and we're going to continue to address them in the next one. What I want to achieve in the next episode is to get the characters that aren't being possessed able to do everything that the other characters that are possessed can do. They can be damaged appropriately and end their stun, do all these things regularly. We're not going to have control over them as the player yet, but I want them to basically just be little dummy characters that we can put in here and test things on. So anyway guys, I hope you enjoyed this episode on tag team matches, and if it helped you set up tag team in your game or improve your processes, then please subscribe. It does more for myself in the series than anything else you can do, and I really appreciate it. I want to give a huge shout out to all you YouTube membership, Discord subscription, and Patreon supporters. You guys are so incredibly kind. So thank you very much. If you had any issues with this tutorial or any of my tutorials, feel free to join the Discord community. I'd be happy to help you, and that support is completely free. But anyway guys, that's all I got, so thank you so much for watching. I'm Shawnthebro, and I'll see you in the next one. Goodbye guys.